Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. My name is JT Olson with a late night recording session. Flying solo tonight, co-host Garrett Ballard. It's well past his bedtime. So we're going to try and get him on the show soon. We are working on some guest analysts to really hammer on this NFL draft that's coming up. But for now, we ride. And got a lot to talk about. Haven't really jumped on here since the beginning of free agency. And, the first couple of weeks have gone by and the dust has settled, and we have a pretty good idea of what this Buccaneers roster is going to look like. Obviously, two big splashes. Well, three. And for the Bucs, those were Chris Godwin, Lavonte David, and Hassan Reddick. First and foremost, Jason Light, one of the best in the business, bringing back his own guys. Lavonte David, mauled retirement for the second year in a row, probably longer than that, but he is returning to the Bucs this year 14, and he is the oldest member actively on this franchise. He supersedes this coaching staff, the previous coaching staff. He supersedes Jason Light. He is the face of the Buccaneers, at least in that building. He's been doing it the longest. He's been doing it at a Hall of Fame level. And he's given it one more ride, try and help this team win another Super Bowl. He had so many down years at the beginning of his career, at least in terms of team success. I think he's really enjoying being in a position to win division titles and go to the playoffs consistently. And he got that elusive championship ring, and he wants another one. And who can blame him? I don't want to say he needs a second ring to solidify his Hall of Fame career, but when you compare the accolades to a guy like Bobby Wagner or Luke Kuechly or any of these other linebackers who are comparable to him, he doesn't stack up. I think he's one Pro Bowl, one second team All-Pro, and really there are so many factors to that. One, playing for a bad team for the first half of his career. Two, Tampa being a smaller media market. The Bucs just don't get the shine like the Cowboys or the Steelers or the 49ers. That's how it is. Not a bad team, a team that's not covered nationally, not going to get recognition by a lot of the voters, and it's unfortunate. So guys like Bobby Wagner got those Pro Bowls. And another factor just being how linebackers are voted for in these things, where Khalil Mack and Von Miller are considered linebackers, and they're taking a spot that really should be going to Lavonte David, as a true linebacker. So he just doesn't have the hardware when it comes to Pro Bowls and All-Pros that other guys do. Now, does that make him less deserving? Absolutely not. This is one of the best linebackers to ever play the game. This is Brian Urlacher. This is Bobby Wagner. This is, you pick your all-time great linebacker. And Lavonte David's right there. Now, he is in those conversations. A guy who is top 10 all-time in tackles for a loss. A guy who's top 10 in tackles. A guy who's always been a great coverage player. A guy who forces a ton of fumbles. Anything you want a linebacker to do, Lavonte David has done it really, really well over his career. And I'm really happy he's coming back. And I think we can all acknowledge that he's lost a step, just a little bit. He is not in the prime of his career, and I think we saw that particularly in pass coverage last year. But he is still a very good player. And I think most teams wish they had a player who was playing at the level of Lavonte David is right now. So, in a perfect world, Todd Bowles will use him not dropping into coverage, similar how he used Devin White early in his career with the Bucs. I call that an attack linebacker, where he is a great run defender. He's a guy you bring pressure with, and really you just don't ask him to cover because that's no longer his strength. That's no longer where he's best. And that's okay. You can still be a great pass rushing linebacker and a great run defending linebacker and still be a really good player in this league. The Bucs need that. They desperately need that. So that's number one. First and foremost, just appreciate one more year, probably the final year of Levante David. Now we got Chris Godwin, another longtime Buck. And you look in the Bucs all-time record books, Chris Godwin is number 2 in probably most every receiving category. And the only one above him is Mike Evans, which, you look at any team's receiving records, Mike Evans would be at the top of those lists. And, with the injury, it was a real shame to see Chris Godwin go down the way he did last year. He was leading the NFL, I think, in receiving yards and receptions, and he's amongst the leader in touchdowns. He was really having an all-pro caliber season when he got hurt, and he absolutely thrived in this offense under Liam Cohen. And then at the end of the Ravens game, it looked like a hip drop tackle to me. I don't know what the NFL wants to call it, but that was it. Ended his year. And there was a lot of speculation that would be it for him in Tampa. He is a great player. He was having a great year. Other teams were going to come knocking, and they did. There are reports out there that the New England Patriots offered him a substantial amount of money, more than what the Bucs did. And I guarantee you the Jaguars, with Liam Cohen in there, they wanted a guy like Chris Godwin to go with Brian Thomas Jr. Really give them some firepower in the receiving room. Chris Godwin, even coming off an injury, he had options. And he chose to stay with the Bucs. And that is such a testament to the culture that's in that locker room, what Chris thinks about the future of this team, being able to contend this year. And really, it says so much about Chris, a guy who's a leader in that locker room, a guy who, he's one of the hardest working guys on the team. And really, he is a Buccaneers legend. And he's at a point in his career where he's got money and he's made money and he's continuing to make money. This was a hometown discount, but he is still a $20+ million receiver. But in the big picture, he's also thinking about legacy. How does he want to be remembered in the NFL? And he wants to be part of this dynamic receiving duo of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, one of the all-time great receiving duos in the NFL. And the numbers back it up. I think they're close to top 5 in receiving yards and touchdowns. They're flirting with all those big names like Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. They're putting themselves in those conversations. And of course, getting another Super Bowl ring would only validate what they are as a duo, because this is historically one of the all-time great receiving duos in NFL history. And they're only going to continue to build on that this year. So to get him back, especially at the price tag the Bucs did, that was a huge win. Huge win to bring your guys back the way that really only Jason Licht does. And then Bucs made a splash right out the gate. I think it was 12:02, 12:05 of free agency. They addressed their biggest need of the offseason, and that is a pass rusher. And, the Bucs did not need another rotational pass rusher. They did not need another Anthony Nelson, who they did bring back and I think is a great depth piece. But that's not what this roster really needed. They needed it, but not like they needed a high ceiling pass rusher. A guy who can be a difference maker. A guy who makes you think about what's going on the edge when you've got Vita Vea and you've got Kalijah Cansey in the middle. You can't just dial in on the middle of the line and you direct your running backs there and you got a double team here and a double team there and you let the edges just beat you and you live with it. That's not good enough. The Bucs needed some firepower on the outside, and they were able to get it with Hassan Reddick. And we know what his year looked like last year. Traded from the Eagles to the Jets, held out, wanted a new contract. There's speculation he never wanted to be in New York, and he didn't go to training camp, and he didn't do anything preseason, and he missed regular season games because he was holding out. And that obviously had an impact on his year. By the time he came back, the Jets season was over. They were firing their coach. They were an Aaron Rodgers media disaster. And I mean, how much motivation is there for a guy when you come into your season and it's already dead? And you don't want to be there to begin with. And you're not getting the money you feel like you deserve or the extension you feel like you deserve. Because Hassan Reddick deserved a payday. I mean, before last year, which was no doubt an underwhelming year for him, he had double-digit sack seasons for 4 or 5 consecutive years. And I think he topped out at 16 and a half. So this is one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. Not that elite tier, but a really good tier. You know, you've got a guy who's getting you 12, 14, 16 sacks. That's a really, really good player. And even if he's one-dimensional, the Bucs desperately needed that dimension to their defense. So there's your big three. And they rounded it out with some quality guys. They brought in Kendall Vildor as a depth corner. That's a guy who will prevent someone like Josh Hayes from ever coming on the field. That's ideally your 4th or 5th corner who has special teams value. I like that. That's an upgrade over the guys you had, like over Tyreek Thunderberg. They brought in Anthony Walker, a linebacker. Lost KJ Britt, which is no major loss there. And I think Britt was not good enough. He just did not have the talent. Walker is more, higher profile NFL athlete. He is faster. He is more fluid. KJ Britt was like a 1970s linebacker where if you want to run it between the tackles, KJ Britt's your guy. He's going to stuff that because really that's where his world is, between the tackles. And once you get outside of that, he's got a lot of limitations. Walker gives you a lot more. Gives you a lot more in coverage, gives you a lot more range, and he comes to you with starting experience. So I don't project him being a starter on this defense. I think he's your number 1 linebacker off the bench. But he gives you experience. He gives you leadership. He gives you more talent than what you had. So, depending on what you think of Saracier Dennis, this is either a really good backup or an upgrade to the starter you had there last year in Britt. And we'll see what we get from Dennis. Worst case scenario, you got Walker and Dennis in on passing downs, maybe Levante rushing the passer some, and you kind of mix that up a little bit, and you just go with that 3-man rotation. And that's solid. That's better what you had. And I think they'll add there in the draft, and we'll touch more on that later, but that trio is okay. I can live with that. You can be successful with that trio of linebackers. And let's see, I know I'm forgetting a few more. I know they brought back Sua Opeta on the offensive line. They lost Justin School, so they had to replace him. They brought in Charlie Heck as your depth swing tackle. Brought back Kyle Trask, which, I could really do without. I'm happy to give someone who's less proven an opportunity than a guy who has more experience and I don't think is any good. So take that for what you will, but Kyle Trask is back. Whoop-de-doo. And really, it's just running it back for the most part outside of that. You got your couple of big fish with your big-name guys, and then it's depth. And then you look towards the draft to fill it out the rest. You address needs in free agency. You don't want to go into the draft pigeonholed into one position. And I think Jason Light did a really good job of that. He got a starting caliber linebacker or a high quality depth linebacker. That was a need. You had to do that. Now you don't have to draft a linebacker early. You got an edge rusher, a really good pass rusher, a guy who has a history, a track record. Now you don't have to go pass rusher in the first round. You've got some flexibility with Tyke Smith, a guy who says he wants to play more safety. So that gives you some options. You don't have to go safety early on. I mean, you don't have to go corner early on because they brought back Bryce Hall. That is another depth signing, a really quality guy off the bench if you're playing a lot of zone coverage. So I think Jason Light and the Bucs did a really nice job filling out this roster. What's up, Sean? Good to see you. Welcome back. We haven't spoken since the Commanders' loss, and I'm glad of that, but it's good to see you. Oh, man. Even bringing it up it still hurts me. Not ready to face that loss yet. Missed opportunity. But props to Sean, big-time Commanders fan. And overall, awesome dude. Great ball knower. Sean, we got to get you on the show. If you do these late night hours, we got to get you on here. But we'll work that out. We'll fine tune the details there. But now I want to look ahead a little bit to the NFL draft. We have a roster in hand. We have all the needs filled. We are ready to go into the season if need be. But there's one more opportunity to acquire talent. And I'm not talking about guys like Devin White. He'll be missed. Thanks for your service, Devin. Have fun in wherever you just latched on with. Baltimore? He wasn't Houston. I don't remember where he signed. But good luck. But I do think the Bucs could draft a linebacker early in this draft. It's a need that was addressed. They're not forced to do it. But realistically, I think that is a direction they could go. Raiders, Sean with the knowledge. See, I'm telling you, knows what's going on. But I think the Bucs are going to be in on the top linebackers in this class. Jahad Campbell from Alabama, Jalen Walker from Georgia. Walker is kind of a hybrid linebacker / pass rusher. He's more a Micah Parsons type. Really, I think he's more of a Hassan Reddick type, which makes him more of an appealing fit, in my opinion, because he's undersized. He doesn't have a ton of polished linebacker skills, but he's built like a linebacker. He's like 6'1", 240. And he's super athletic, and he's super explosive, but he's not polished in coverage. You can tell he just hasn't had the reps there. He doesn't have the natural feel for it. And really, he projects more as a pass rusher, in my opinion. But that's okay, because the Bucs need a pass rusher, even with Reddick. And if you can get a guy who's in that Hassan Reddick mold and let him learn from Hassan Reddick, that feels like a really good approach to developing a guy like Jalen Walker. I'd be very interested in him if he were on the board. Will he be? Yeah, I think it's actually kind of 50-50. I think there are some good tools there to work with. I think NFL teams will be appealed by. But he's small. And, do you really want an outlier that you're using your early first-round pick on? It'd make me uncomfortable if it was my job on the line. And a lot of these teams picking before the Bucs, they are more kind of on the hot seat. They are not successful teams to various degrees. So, I don't know. I think there's a real chance Jalen Walker could be on the board, and I would not be mad about that pick. I tend to lean a little bit more in favor of Jahad Campbell because he's a more polished player and a more traditional linebacker. And really, looking at the linebackers, Levante David probably in his last year. He's on a 1-year contract. He's probably going to be done after this. Anthony Walker on a 1-year deal. He is an answer for this season, but he's probably not a long-term piece. So when you look at the long-term future of the middle linebacker spot, really it's Servassier Dennis, who I'm very high on. I think he's going to be a really good player, but he's been injured, and he hasn't proven that yet. So I think a guy like Campbell could be a high priority for the Bucs. He is fast. He's just racks up a ton of tackles. He's really good in coverage. He's someone who can be used on the blitz. Schematically, I think he's a great fit in a Todd Bowles defense. And I think they're going to be absolutely drawn to him. Comes off as a really high character dude, really high football character, high IQ. I don't think he has incredible instincts as a linebacker. From watching Levante David over the last decade and a half, I just don't feel like he sees those little creases that he can fire through and make plays in the backfield. I think he's see it, chase it, more than just the natural read it and know it before it's even happening. But with more experience, those instincts become more and more refined. And I think he is a really high floor player and a really high ceiling player. So I think that's someone who's absolutely going to get consideration. Then I look at the pass rushers. It's still a need. Hassan Reddick's only on a 1-year deal. And after that, you've got Yaya Diaby, who we all want to take a step. But again, he has to prove he's that guy. Then we got Anthony Nelson, who is a depth player, a good depth player, but a depth player. And Chris Braswell, who I'm still high on. We knew he was going to be a slow burn when he was drafted. Power players in college don't immediately translate to the NFL, but that's okay. We knew he was going to take some time to develop, and I have just as much faith in him developing as the day they drafted him. But again, he's got to prove it. He has not shown essentially anything in the NFL yet. So you have Yaya, who's been successful, but hasn't proven he can be a number one pass rusher. Braswell, who I think has a good potential, but probably not that of a number one pass rusher. And Anthony Nelson. Those are your guys long term. And then you have some depth guys like Jose Ramirez, and we don't know what those guys are. Those guys can't crack the lineup. We can't assume they'll become anything. Getting a pass rusher makes a lot of sense, and there are a lot of pass rushers who could be available when the Bucs pick. I already talked about Jalen Walker, who is a linebacker, but I view as more as a pass rusher. There are also guys like Mykel Williams, a pass rusher out of Georgia. Really, really incredible athlete. Big, powerful, explosive. He's got some rush moves. Really like his game. Mike Green led the NCAA in sacks last year with 17. He's got a ton of pass rush moves. He's incredibly polished. He's explosive. He's bendy. He is a really good player. On the field, I have very few questions about him. Then you got a guy like Donovan Ezeraku, who is very much the same kind of cut. High football IQ, high character guy. A ton of pass rush moves. He's probably got the deepest arsenal of pass rush moves in the entire draft. He's one of the most flexible players in the class. I think he had the best agility drills at the combine. So I think both him and Mike Green are exactly the type of player the Bucs are looking for. And I think those guys will both be on the board. And John, I'm right there with you. I love Mike Green's game. I think he is the perfect fit for the Bucs in terms of on the field. The big question with him is the off the field. There have been allegations brought against him from his previous stops at college when he played at Virginia and going back to his high school years. So, I'm not going to pretend to have any kind of knowledge on that kind of stuff. I have no opinion on it. I don't know details of the case, let alone if I feel like he's guilty or innocent or anything like that. But the Bucs need to determine what kind of person he is. What's his football character? Is he going to show up to work? Is he going to give 100% effort? Is he a good teammate? Is he a good locker room guy? I don't think the legal allegations are going to land him in jail and prevent him from playing football. So moving forward, if you think his character is good and you think he's going to be a leader for your team and a cornerstone piece, that's something that Jason Light has to figure out. And if all those boxes are checked and he feels comfortable with it, I really think he's going to be in play. But that's a massive if. It's a huge caveat. I have no idea what that looks like. But I think you're getting very much the same player in Donovan Ezeraku. Great pass rusher, good athlete, and no allegations with Ezeraku. Comes off as a very high football character. I think those are the kind of players the Bucs are going to be looking at. Williams, Ezeraku, Green. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Shamar Stewart is a guy who's a freak athlete, but was not very productive in college. I think he'll be considered. He'll be someone who's looked at, but I don't think he's really going to be in play. I think it's going to be those other guys, Green, Ezeraku, Walker, and Mykel Williams. I think those are the edge rushers we're looking at. Then safety, I don't think is in play in the first round. It's just none of these guys really fit the Bucs metrics. Malachi Starks, I think, in a vacuum, is great. I think he's the best safety in the draft. I think he's a top 15 player. I just don't think he fits what the Bucs are looking for. He doesn't meet their athletic profiles they've gravitated to. He isn't the ball hawk that they say they want. I mean, and you put him in man-to-man coverage, and he's as locked down as anybody. I mean, he could play outside corner. He's so good in man-to-man coverage. But in terms of what the Bucs are looking for, I don't think he really fits that profile. Do you think Stewart going to thrive in the league? I think he has all the tools to thrive in the league, but I wouldn't want to be the one to draft him. I think he can play a little out of control, and I don't think his agilities are great. And I think he can be used in a very effective way, more than he was in college. I think in college he did a lot of two-gapping. I think he had a lot of responsibility on his plate in terms of run support. But if you just let him attack the quarterback, I think he'll have a more productive pro career than he did a college career. But would I want to bet my job on him? I wouldn't. I'd rather get him in the early second, but I don't think that's a realistic option because his athletic tools are just so good. Stark gets lost to some deep routes at times, but he's definitely a stud in the right scheme. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I don't view him as a traditional single high safety, the ball hawk. He's definitely not the Ed Reed type, which I think is more the mold the Bucs are looking for. But in terms of, you just line him up as like a nickel, or, you say, hey, you erase the tight end or you erase the running back on this play. I don't think I've seen someone as good as him in a long time, just locking someone up man to man. Not in terms of safeties. Like, he is a rare talent in that department. But I just don't think that's what the Bucs are looking for. They're running a lot more zone in the last few years. He doesn't take the ball away, which is something they've really emphasized this offseason. I just don't think he's the right fit. But in someone's scheme, he'll be great. I really believe that. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber player. You just got to get the right match for him. I think the other big need the Bucs are looking at is corner. And there is one who I really, really like, and I don't think the Bucs are going to draft. And there's another one who I really, really like, who I don't think will be on the board, but he might be. He's kind of trending down in terms of mock drafts and things like that. So it's one of those things where I don't want to get my hopes up because I think he's a top 10 player in the draft. But I'm seeing him mocked at 14, 16. You never know. That guy is Will Johnson from Michigan. Will Johnson is absolutely fantastic. And he did not have the great year coming into this season. His final season in college, it was injury took away most of it. And even when he was playing early on, he was left on an island a lot of time because he's a star player, and that's what you ask of your star players. And there were times he got burned on it. He is a guy who really prioritizes going for interceptions. He is one of the best in the draft in terms of taking the ball away. And his timing can be great. And he had a couple of pick sixes. He is incredibly dangerous on the outside. But there are other times where it bit him. And this was probably his worst year. But his freshman year, he was great. His sophomore year, he was great. He was the best player in the secondary that won the national championship. Best player in the back seven. And that also included Mikey Sanderstill, who got drafted, I think, in the second round last year. So we've got 2 years of outstanding film for Will Johnson and 1 year of okay film. I'm going to take the bigger sample size, and I'm going to go with the 2 years. I think he is fantastic. Oh, Sean, yeah, you guys, Washington ended up with Sanderstill, who is my favorite player on that team. He is a pit bull. But yeah, I think everyone would love to get their hands on Will Johnson. he will definitely be picked before Washington. He'll probably be picked before Tampa. There have been some questions about his long speed, which that doesn't add up to me because I have no question about it when I watch him. But, that's kind of the buzz from the big names who are connected, the Daniel Jeremiahs. Teams are questioning his long speed. So that might hurt him a little bit. The fact that he didn't have the best year, he went with an injury. Maybe there's some speculation he could have toughed it out or he could have come back, but Michigan wasn't having a good season. Maybe that's working against him a little bit. I don't know. But I know he is a really, really good player. He has all the size you're looking for. I think he's 6'2". He has the ball skills. He is great in man coverage. He's great in zone coverage. He can do it all. So if he's available at pick 19, that's one of those sprint the card up kind of picks. And I think he's probably going to be the top player on the Bucs draft board if available, at least in terms of guys who could be on the board then. Obviously, Travis Hunter is probably their number one guy. He's going to be gone. Mason Graham, probably really high on their board. He'll be gone. Will Johnson's really that first guy who could be there, in my opinion. And I don't anticipate him being there, but it's not out of the realm of realistic possibility. So that's a guy who I'm really looking at. And then kind of an under-the-radar need is defensive line. And the Bucs have emphasized they need pass rush. They need to get home with 4. It's all about getting home with 4. Pass rush. You can't live and die on the blitz. And we've talked to death about edge rusher, and rightfully so. I think that is the priority. But that's not the only way to get a pass rush. And we already know that because Kalijah Kancey is one of the best pass rushers from the interior in the NFL. Vita Vea is an absolute monster. But the Bucs are typically running 3 defensive linemen. And Logan Hall, I thought his film was a little bit better this year. I thought he kind of took a little step forward. His sack numbers were up. This was his most productive year. I still don't think he's great. I think in a perfect world, he's your number one guy off the bench. Darius Alexander from Toledo is, in my opinion, just an absolute stud. He is incredibly explosive. He is powerful. He has long arms. And he has polished pass rush moves. Really, if you have a trio of Kancey, Vea, and Alexander, that's really hard to block. And you can play games with those guys. And then you still have someone on the edge, like a Hassan Reddick, or a second, third round pick. I would be really excited about that. And I think he checks all their boxes. He's the right type of athlete. He can do all the things the Bucs want to do. I think he's going to be an option. I don't think he'll be the top option because he is going to be 25 as a rookie. But I think he'll be a realistic first-round option for them. And I'm for that. I love Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I do too. Kenneth Grant is really good. I think he had a 7 RAS. So that's going to take him out of the mix for the Buccaneers. But I'm all for a big body nose tackle. I want 700 pounds of beef in the middle of my defense. Vea and another 350-pound dude. And just good luck. Good luck against that. Or even more. Desmond Watson out of Florida. Honestly, I haven't watched anything of him. I'm sure people who watch this podcast, a lot of other Bucs fans could probably speak more on him than I could. I don't watch Florida football. So I'm definitely going to check him out before the draft, though, because that kind of size, you can't teach it. It's just insane. And I think 425, I think he kind of shortchanged him a lot, actually. I thought he weighed in at 460 at his pro day or at his personal workout. The dude is freaking huge. So I'll definitely check him out at some point, but not going to be a guy who's probably going super early in the draft because that kind of size is an outlier. There are not a lot of people anywhere built like that, let alone playing in the NFL. Yeah, freaking unbelievable. I think he was 462 was his weigh in. I'd have to check his RAS card. but geez. So I don't think they'll go in that direction early. I would love to get Kenneth Grant on the Bucs, move V to more of a 3-tech, let Grant take on more double teams. Just let these big guys overpower their opponents. Don't put anyone one-on-one against V. Don't put anyone one-on-one against Kenneth Grant because they're going to bend him in half. It's bad. So I think those are the guys. Looking at defensive line, Darius Alexander, cornerback Will Johnson, edge rusher Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Donovan Ezeraku, and Mike Green, and linebacker Jihad Campbell. I think those are the 7 you look for in the first round. And I think depending on where you go, you kind of build off that. Do you go corner or safety in the second round? I think those are going to be 2 high priorities. Looking at guys like Xavier Watts, looking at guys like Jahdae Barron, Savon Ravel, who I think would be a perfect fit in this Bucs defense. Really like him. Do you get a guy like Carson Swessinger, the linebacker out of UCLA? That's a guy who I really like. You know, it all starts with the first domino. And I think those 7 names, that's your first domino to look at. Will Johnson, Darius Alexander, Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, Mike Green, Donovan Ezeraku, and Jihad Campbell. After that, the draft is all about possibilities. Could go in thousands and thousands of different directions. But I think corner, safety, edge, linebacker, those are going to be your highest priorities. It's going to be some mixture of those 4 guys in the first 4 rounds, most likely. Now, you get a depth lineman, a defensive lineman later. You get a depth wide receiver later. But I think that is the direction the Bucs will go. Mostly all defense, yeah. I think they might snag a receiver at one point. If the board breaks right, it could be on day 2. If a guy like Higgins is there from Iowa State, I think they'd really like him. I think Jalen Noel from Iowa State as well. If they can get him in the 3rd round, I think he's a name they're really, really interested in. If someone unexpected falls to the 2nd round, like a Luther Burden or maybe a Matthew Golden, those guys would obviously be in play. But I think this is going to be a very defensive-heavy draft. Edge rusher, linebacker, corner, safety. And I think it'd be those 4 in some order with the first 4 picks. But, so much is going to depend on who they pick with that first one. Probably an edge rusher because that's the deepest pool of candidates. But it could be linebacker, could be corner, could be defensive line. And if it's defensive line, that'll change it. That'll change the trajectory of the whole draft for them. John, you cannot have Cody Mauch. Cody Mauch is a stud. He got no front teeth. He's got red hair. He's an agitator, and he's a really good football player. And he's only going to get better with more experience inside. So that's where the Bucs are going to hang their hat this year, is on offense and on that offensive line. Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke, Cody Mauch, Graham Barton taking a step forward, and probably Ben Bredesen at left guard, although that's not a dream come true for me. I'd rather they have gone in a different direction in the offseason. But you know what? You're keeping the band together. You're keeping the continuity. They were one of the top 5 offensive line in football last year. They're probably going to be that this year. I'm not going to nitpick the weak link. I wish he wasn't the weak link. I wish he was better than what he is. But overall, that unit is really good, and Cody Mauch's a huge part of that. Oh, maybe they'll grab a depth guy. I really like Elijah Klein, the 5th or 6th round guy they got in the draft last year. I'm interested to see how he develops and how he can try and compete for that job. Jackson Slater, I know, he is a prototypical Jason Light offensive lineman, guy who's played tackle. He is powerful. He's athletic. He's a small school guy from, I think, Sacramento State. So I could see them grabbing a guy like that in round 4 or 5, depending on how the board breaks. But I think this is going to be basically all defense. So I'm going to probably wrap it up right there. We are going to start jumping into some of the evaluations of these, talk more than just the top guys, because there's a lot of players in this draft, and you're not going to get them all in the first round. You are going to get a 3rd round linebacker or a 4th round corner or something like that. So I want to kind of go through a longer list of names. I'm going to dedicate a couple of episodes to these positions and really hammer home, those 4 positions specifically, because I think that's the direction the Bucs go. I think that is the most important route, the most important needs that they hit. And I think there's a lot of names to look at, especially looking at linebackers. There's really one off-ball linebacker who I think fits their profile in the first round. Probably won't get him. It'll probably be someone else. So who are those 2nd-round guys? Those Carson Schlesingers, those Chris Paul Jr., those Demetrius Knight, those Nick Martins. We'll break into them. Look at who ranks where. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I will be back Friday, 9:30, and hopefully Garrett will be here. We'll see. If not, I'm going to try and bring on a guest, talk about these prospects. Already reaching out, getting some feelers out there. So we'll keep it a surprise for now. But until next time, go Bucs.